Hi everyone, my name is David Schmidt, and I served in Peace Corps Nicaragua from 2014 through 2017 as a TEFL volunteer. While there, I co-planned and co-taught EFL with secondary and post-secondary teachers, and I spent a good portion of my time there designing and implementing professional development activities for Nicaraguan English teachers and English teacher trainers. This is my proposal for a supplemental training seminar to support Peace Corps TEFL volunteers and their counterparts in making the change from more traditional EFL teaching approaches to more contemporary ones. The Nicaraguan Ministry of Education and Peace Corps have spent over 30 years on the project of transitioning from teacher-centered English instruction to more communicative and student-centered approaches. But despite their efforts, Nicaraguan English education remains largely unchanged, with a preference for grammar translation and audiolingual drilling. Even with the support of Peace Corps volunteers, counterpart English teachers, and the Ministry of Education at large, continue to struggle to adopt language instruction that is more communicative and student-centered. There are three factors that are limiting the spread of communicative language teaching, task-based language teaching, and other student-centered approaches. Specifically, skepticism about the effectiveness and feasibility of these methods when working with Nicaraguan students, lack of explicit training in how to support Nicaraguan teachers in transitioning their teaching towards approaches that are more interactive and student-centered, and lack of explicit training and experience implementing lessons that are more communicative and student-centered among Nicaraguan EFL trainers and their supervisors. Former Peace Corps Nicaragua TEFL volunteer, I have firsthand experience of the barriers facing volunteers and their counterparts as they attempt to implement student-centered instruction in a culture that remains strongly inclined towards teacher-centered instruction. Put simply, both Peace Corps volunteers and their counterparts currently lack the explicit training and targeted support necessary to transition from more teacher-centered to more student-centered approaches. To increase the likelihood of successfully achieving the desired change in teaching behaviors, the training will provide explicit instruction and analysis of different EFL methodologies in the context of Nicaraguan secondary education, ongoing support and feedback throughout the planning and implementation of teaching which is more student-centered, guided reflections and feedback on teaching practices, and a final observation to assess to what extent participants are applying what they learned in the classroom. The underlying premise is that explicit instruction, meaningful practice, expert support throughout the implementation process, structured reflective teaching, and feedback on teaching will help secure the desired behavior change by scaffolding the adoption of interactive, student-centered EFL instruction. In planning for this seminar, an environmental analysis was carried out following the guidance of Nation and McAllister's Language Curriculum Design, 2010. Participants, trainers, and resources were assessed using the following questions. For the participants, who is the target audience? What do they know? What skills do they need to develop? And do they have any preferred ways of learning? For the trainers, are they experienced in providing more student-centered, communicative, focused instruction in the Nicaraguan context? Are they confident in their use of English and student-centered language instruction? And do they have time to study their curriculum and provide monitoring and evaluation to the participants? And finally, regarding the situation, is there a suitable space to hold the event? Is there enough time? Are there enough resources? And is it worth developing the course? The participants of the proposed training seminar are 15 active TEFL volunteers and 15 active Nicaraguan English teaching counterparts. By the time of the training, the Peace Corps volunteers will have had 3 months of full-time co-teaching experience in the Nicaraguan context and 3 months of pre-service technical training in TEFL teaching. All volunteers have completed undergraduate degrees or higher prior to service, and their Spanish proficiency ranges are from A2 to C1 on the Common European Framework. The Nicaraguan counterpart teachers are all English teachers with anywhere from 2 to 20 years of experience teaching EFL in Nicaraguan secondary schools, but they have limited training in the implementation of more student-centered approaches such as communicative language teaching and task-based language teaching. Most teachers have studied English exclusively in Nicaragua, and they have English proficiency levels ranging anywhere from an A2 to a C1 on the Common European Framework. The trainer or trainers for the seminar must have experience successfully implementing communicative activities and lesson plans in Nicaraguan public school settings. The ideal trainers for each session would be a Peace Corps volunteer and Nicaraguan English teaching counterpart pair who have successfully implemented communicative activities and student-centered instruction in their classes. Alternatively, Peace Corps staff or an outside trainer could provide the training if necessary. Trainers would prepare by studying their assigned presentation materials from the curriculum and meeting with Peace Corps staff for a final review of their personalized, adapted lesson plans and materials for these trainings. In order to implement this project, a hotel with a conference space will be required. Fortunately, there are multiple hotel spaces that meet these requirements throughout Nicaragua's largest cities and travel hubs of Esteli, Diriamba, Jinotepe, Managua, and Masaya. The seminar will take one full work week to implement, so participants would ideally arrive Sunday evening and depart Saturday morning. Given the duration of this activity, it is recommended that the seminar be conducted in mid-January, immediately prior to the start of the new school year. The seminar would cost approximately $1,670 to implement, including food, lodging, transportation, and materials. There are grants and other funding sources available to implement projects such as this through the local NGO Fundación Uno, Peace Corps project funds, the State Department, USAID, and crowdsourcing that is hosted by the Peace Corps. Given this, the project is clearly feasible. The needs analysis was informed by Nation McAllister 2010, which suggests dividing the needs analysis into three categories: needs, wants, and lacks. In discussions with other Peace Corps volunteers and their counterparts, I identified that Peace Corps volunteers need training in how to facilitate the transition from the standard approaches seen in Nicaraguan EFL classrooms towards lessons and activities that are more student-centered and interactive. They want more concrete ideas and examples of communicative activities and how to implement them, and they lack experience teaching EFL, training EFL teachers, and a general knowledge of the Nicaraguan educational culture. Meanwhile, Nicaraguan EFL teachers need more training in essential concepts related to EFL instruction, including the underlying rationale for student-centered and communicative language teaching approaches. Nicaraguan English teachers also want ideas for activities that will engage their students and teaching strategies that will increase student interaction and enhance EFL learning. And finally, Nicaraguan English teachers lack the confidence and knowledge needed to implement language instruction that is more communicative. The overarching goal of this seminar is to support Peace Corps volunteers and their counterparts in successfully transitioning from teacher-centered EFL instruction to EFL instruction that is more communicative and student-centered. To this end, teachers will analyze videos of other Nicaraguan teachers implementing different language teaching approaches, develop an action plan to begin creating more ideal environments for EFL learning, practice adapting activities and lessons that are more teacher-centered to being more student-centered, practice developing communicative language tasks using authentic texts, and practice developing alternative types of assessment that are more aligned with the principles of student-centered approaches such as communicative language teaching and task-based language teaching. The seminar would take place over the course of 5 full days. On the first day, participants will get a brief overview of the development of language teaching methodology over time and analyze examples of teachers applying different methodologies in the Nicaraguan context. By the end of this unit, participants will be able to distinguish between grammar translation, audiolingual, the natural approach, communicative language teaching, and task-based language teaching, and describe the benefits of language instruction that is both more student-centered and interactive. On the second day, participants will reflect on traditional approaches to classroom management in Nicaragua and learn how to create an ideal learning environment in classroom to support English language acquisition. By the end of the unit, they will have a broader understanding about how to effectively manage an EFL classroom, and they will develop an action plan documenting specific steps that will be taken to improve their learning environments. On the third day, participants will reflect on the pros and cons of both teacher-centered and student-centered approaches, and by the end of the unit, participants will demonstrate an ability to modify lessons and activities that are more passive and teacher-centered to make them more interactive and student-centered. On the fourth day, participants will reflect on lesson planning and the content of EFL classes and apply a lesson planning framework for developing lessons that are more interactive and student-centered. By the end of the unit, participants will have developed their own lesson plan for the first day of school using the framework. On the fifth day, participants will reflect on EFL assessment practices and learn alternative forms of assessment that are more aligned with student-centered and interactive approaches to language instruction. By the end of the unit, teachers will have developed at least 2 alternative forms of assessments for the content of their lesson plans for the first day of school. In the next few slides, I will very briefly present the budget and costs for the seminar. The cost of developing the project was $1,200. This was calculated by maintaining a log of hours, as depicted here on the screen, spent designing the curriculum and materials for the project, and then multiplying the sum of the hours by the hourly rate of $30. The cost of implementing this project is expected to be approximately $1,670, with all funds being dedicated to transportation, food, lodging, materials, and photocopies. The total cost of the project would be $2,868, and we get that number by adding the development cost of $1,200 to the estimated implementation cost of $1,668. To assess the effectiveness and impact of the project, both qualitative and quantitative data will be collected and analyzed. To measure the impact of the project, the following quantitative data will be collected: the number of participants in the initial training, the number of participants who are applying techniques that they learned during training sessions in their classrooms, the number of students who are receiving modified EFL instruction, the number of participants who have replicated a workshop in their department, municipality, or town, the number of teacher or teacher trainers who participated in replicas of the workshops, and the number of teachers who received replica trainings who have begun to transition to more student-centered teaching. To assess the quality and measure behavior change, the following qualitative data will be collected. After each session, participants will complete a feedback questionnaire. Data will be collected and recorded in a database, and at the end of the seminar, participants will also complete an extended questionnaire. At the end of each session, the trainers will complete a hot feedback, which documents highlights of the training session, challenges, and suggestions to improve the training for future implementations. The trainers will also collect and evaluate all lesson, activity, and action plans developed by participants and use rubrics to provide participants with feedback on their lesson plans, activities, and action plans. Participants will receive one observation and feedback session focused on their ability or their success implementing the more student-centered practices. And every 2 weeks after the seminar, volunteers will submit a 1-page narrative reflection worksheet describing what they have applied in their classrooms, its effectiveness, challenges they've experienced, and possible solutions to these challenges. In this module, teachers learn about the environmental factors that are essential for effective EFL instruction. Reflecting the design of other modules, this module starts off with a discussion, which serves to activate the participants' prior knowledge and experiences regarding the ideal classroom environment. After the initial pair work conversations, the trainer facilitates an open discussion using the PowerPoint slides to share best practices and discuss the participants' experiences in EFL classroom management. To support and model the best practices, video demonstrations from real Nicaraguan classrooms are included. What follows is an example of one of the videos demonstrating the effective use of calls to attention in an EFL classroom of over 60 students.
Okay, students. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. 1, 2, eyes on you. the conversation here. Please, everybody with me, okay? The first one is for you. 1, 2, 3. How are you? Repeat, please. How are you? Okay. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Okay. Can you repeat with me, please? Yeah. What's his phone number? What's his phone number? Remember, this is extra. This is strong. And here is you. This is weak. Okay.
Finally, the module concludes by having Peace Corps volunteers and their counterparts work together to develop an action plan describing how they will apply the content of the presentation and workshop to their own teaching practice. All units will follow this same basic outline in which participants first participate in a discussion about the topic, then they are presented with relevant information and practice in developing their own plans for implementing student-centered teaching and interactive teaching. And finally, they produce their own plan. 3 years of experience working in Nicaragua's public school system as a Peace Corps TEFL volunteer inspired me to pursue the development of the seminar. I know the challenges facing Peace Corps volunteers and their counterparts, and I believe this is a sound approach to help address the biggest gap in Peace Corps TEFL training. Based on my research, the project is highly feasible, and I am confident in its potential to finally help Nicaraguan English teachers understand how and why they should adopt language instruction that is more student-centered and communicative in nature to benefit the future of their country.